Welcome to Love Thy Lawyer, where we generally speak to attorneys about their lives and careers. I'm your host, Louis Goodman. Today, we welcome Ken Crutchfield to the podcast. Mr. Crutchfield is not an attorney, but he knows a lot about us. He is with the Wolters Kluwer's Legal Markets Group, providing content, analysis, and workflow solutions. He's been a senior vice president at Bloomberg Tax Technology and has held executive positions at Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis. He has worked in varying industries, including tax, accounting, and legal. Ken Crutchfield, welcome to Love Thy Lawyer.
Thank you, Louis. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Where are you speaking to us from right now?
So I am in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. This is my home and my home office.
Where is your firm located?
So Wolters Kluwer is actually a Dutch company. So we're headquartered about 45 minutes south of Amsterdam. Our U.S. headquarters are in Riverwoods, Illinois, and then also in New York City.
Can you explain a little bit about the type of work that you do and how it relates to the legal community?
Absolutely. So Wolters Kluwer is a company that serves professionals in a number of areas, including health, financial services, tax and accounting, and most importantly, legal. So we provide information, products, and software solutions to professionals to make their work better. And I'm responsible for the U.S. market legal research products. And that is really what I focus on. So if you think of searching for laws, regulations, understanding those so that you can better advise a client on how to comply with the law, that's the core focus.
How long have you been doing this sort of work?
So I've been with Wolters Kluwer for nearly 6 years now, and that's really their core focus. But I've been in and around the legal industry coming up on 43 years.
Everyone in the legal industry, from the time they walk into their first day at law school, probably until the day they die, knows Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis. Can you talk a little bit about what your work there was?
I started as an intern right out of my first year in college. And my first 40 hours on the job was listening to customer support calls where lawyers were calling in to try to understand how to use this fancy legal research service back in 1982. And I really started, as a very technical person, but I was able to understand and learn what the market needed and translate that to technical people. At Thomson Reuters, I actually worked in the tax and accounting area, products that support what's called transfer pricing, which is really international tax compliance, large multinational corporations that need to be able to pay their fair share of taxes in all jurisdictions, but not get double taxed.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, but I was born in Atlanta, Georgia.
And is that where you went to high school in Dayton?
Yeah, Centerville High School, which is in a suburb of Dayton. So it was a great place to grow up and be from.
And then you went to The Ohio State, is that correct?
The Ohio State University, yes. It was a great experience and a great time. Just a little side story there. I was walking around town today with a Michigan hat on because my son managed to end up coaching with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan on their football team. So I've got divided loyalties now in terms of and a greater appreciation of a number of schools where he's worked because it's not all just about Ohio State anymore.
Tell us where Wright State fits in and where that is.
Well, Wright State's named after the Wright brothers, so it's also a Dayton-based school. I got a master's of business administration, an MBA there. I got to learn about international business and actually learned and wrote a paper about back in the day. So it was very interesting, very fun. I learned a lot by being able to apply my MBA education to the work that I was doing.
Can you talk a little bit about applying that MBA knowledge and experience to the legal industry, and what is it about the legal industry that attracted you as a business person?
Sure. So I think I went through a discovery process of what I was good at, what I liked, and what other people thought was a good fit for me. So I started in a very technical role. I literally started in the data center with the raised floor and cold air blowing on the computers to keep them from overheating. And I worked my way through that by listening to conversations and realizing, these business people don't understand the technical people and my process in terms of realizing there's a role for me in business doing that kind of technical translation. That was the best I could describe it at the time. But also understanding the legal side, which as you learn a little bit more, realize lawyers are making arguments, and arguments are, very similar to defining and writing software. You have to come up with a tight, rational logic that works, and then, present that in the same way that a software engineer has to come up with tight logic that works for a software application to work. So that was one of the areas that I thought was interesting. Another one, yes, I got to learn law a little bit more, is you talk US code is where the words code come for software too. It's logic. It's defining the rules, and you have to understand the different definitions and parameters in the law to be able to interpret what the law means. And it's the same thing that software engineers do when they write code.
So when you first got into this and, you're telling your friends and your family, hey, I'm working with lawyers. I'm using my MBA skills to work with lawyers. What did people think? What did they understand about what your work was?
It went over their heads. So most of it was, oh, so you're in computers. That was the best that they could understand, because the technology side was more important to them than who the customers were. So that was really the core focus there. You could apply technology to the practice of law, or, back in the days, how you could do something that was essentially a Google search before anybody had ever heard of Google or the internet.
Now, I remember back in the day, the Wang computer system, and I know that you've had some experience with that as well. And it was one of the very early word processing machines that was around. It really was a machine. And I wonder if you'd kind of take us through the technology that you've been through and how that technology has evolved since, let's say, the Wang system, what that was and how it's evolved, and kind of where you see things going.
Sure. Digital Equipment Corporation and Wang were kind of that mid-tier that were used in a number of places. The Wang VS systems, typically in law firms, were running word processing. And you had a giant typing pool of basically admins that were going through and typing up information for lawyers to be able to take and plead in court.
And I just think of the technology that I've seen in my own lifetime moving forward at just such an enormous pace in the legal profession, and how lawyers really can do so much more legal work given the technology. I kind of do see it going forward in that direction with AI. I don't think lawyers are going to be replaced, but I think that lawyers will be able to do more effective work using some of these new technologies. You have to use it carefully, I mean, lawyers have already gotten a lot of trouble with AI, but right. I think if it's used carefully, I think it's got a great future.
Yeah, understanding what a technology does is important so that it doesn't get misused. But I absolutely agree. I think the cerebral work that really, I think, gets most lawyers excited, and is probably why they went to school in the first place, is the type of work that they'll continue to get to do. I think more of the mundane work will go away. I think of bankers' boxes with young attorneys coming in and sifting through back when discovery was paper-based versus the way it is today. There's a lot of work that is just much more value added that's going to be done either by the billable hour or maybe fixed bid in the future. And I think that's going to be the wave of the future.
Yeah, I sometimes when a new technology comes in, people are all worried about it. And I say, give it 6 months, you won't know how you lived without it.
Right.
Speaking of which, you've been talking about lawyers and working with lawyers. What is it that you really like about working with lawyers and the legal profession? Obviously you could work with any group of people that you wanted, but you've chosen to work with lawyers.
Yes. Legal work is interesting because it ties so much into business. It's the guardrails for, what you can and can't do in business. I think that's important. My time spent in tax, both with accountants and with lawyers, I find that tax drives a lot of decision making. And so getting creative in terms of how you can structure it, manage your business effectively to keep profit and still pay your fair share of taxes is a great example of the sort of interesting things that law becomes.
If a young person were just graduating from college thinking about a career, would you recommend the law?
I have very broad thoughts on that one. I would say yes, but a qualified yes, because I think for anybody, in the same way that I went through that process unknowingly of figuring out what I liked, what I didn't like, what I was good at, and what other people thought, that's a process that I think everybody should go through, is that kind of discovery process, and think about those three aspects and recognize it is a journey. You have to be strong at bringing in business and keeping clients satisfied, which isn't necessarily what you're taught in law school. And if you go down the small law route, you're hanging up a shingle, you have to know how to advertise, you have to know how to get business, you have to keep your books, you have to make sure people pay their bills, all those different things that aren't the activities that you were thinking about when you went to law school.
Yeah, this is something that I come back to on this podcast all the time, which is that I don't think that law schools teach any of this, and I think that they're committing malpractice by not teaching it. And so many lawyers ultimately end up in small private practices of 1, 2, 5, 10-person firms, where
Right.
it really is important to know something about how to be a business person. And I think that for those attorneys who go into the big firm world, that it's really critical that they have the ability to build a book of business. And there's just there's no getting around it. There's no avoiding it. Unless you're going to go into the government and stay in the government your entire life, on some level, if you're a lawyer, you've got to be a business person.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my rant.
You can go in-house too. I mean, ultimately, the path for a lot is to go in-house. And the first thing you need to know is what the business goals and objectives are, what is success for the business, to be able to properly advise the business on how to navigate the various issues that surface.
Do you think the legal system's fair? You see it from kind of a different angle than a lot of us do. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, if you think the legal system is fair.
I think it's fair, generally speaking, for those that can participate. But I think there's a lot of challenges if you step back with access to justice, the ability for individuals to be able to participate at the lower ends of society. I've also seen a couple of studies that suggest that there is a substantial latent demand where individual consumers or even don't have enough legal guidance on the things that they're doing. So from that standpoint, I think supply and demand are out of sync. As a matter of fact, I just had a situation like that today with a small organization that I've engaged with in a different capacity. And I realized, they're kind of winging it. And so there's definitely things like that I think are out there. I think technology could play a substantial role in balancing that out and, making justice, which is the whole purpose of this, is a justice system to provide, fairness and equity to citizens of the United States and do things ethically.
How do you define success for yourself?
Success to me is getting up and being able to look yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye, feel good about what you're doing, understanding that you're helping people along the way, and trying to really pay it forward. I think that's an important aspect of anything. That allows me, if I'm, on Saturday on a leisurely day, if I see something that I can do to help somebody, I can do that. I like to mentor. I struggle with situations where I've had jobs at points in my career where I didn't feel like that was part of the equation in the same way. So I like to make a difference. I like to make an impact on the profession that I'm serving. but I also like to make an impact on the people that are around me, because at the end of the day, people and relationships are the most important.
What mistakes do you think lawyers make?
So that's a great question. They get very protective on the legal risk and think that they're providing the best value by explaining the risk and then saying, don't cross that line. I'll give the analogy the way I would do something that's 5 years old. It's okay. Don't cross the street is really the issue. There are cars coming. But rather than teaching how to look both ways, understand what's the proper risk and to go when there are no cars, you tell the child, don't cross the street, it's dangerous. And as a matter of fact, don't even stand on the sidewalk, stand on the other side of the sidewalk so you're careful and you never will have it. That does not help business. That does not help clients, I think, as much as helping someone understand and balance the risk and be more of an advisor, but clearly explaining the legal risk that's there, but then helping the individual or the clients at a corporation know how to balance that out with other things.
Let's say you came into some real money, $3 or $4 billion. What, if anything, would you do differently in your life?
Hopefully it wouldn't change me too much. I'd probably look to get, a second home or something like that and be able to enjoy a little bit more the comforts from that standpoint, but I wouldn't want it to change much more about what I do. I would really think long and hard about how I could give that money to organizations to make an impact. That would be something that I would want to do, but getting creative on how you do that, because I think just providing finances without having skin in the game or some other incentives gets to be a challenge. So I would be looking to be a philanthropist at that point and try to figure out how I would give that money away.
Let's say you had a Super Bowl ad. Someone gave you 60 seconds on the Super Bowl to say whatever you wanted to a really large audience.
Think about how you can have a purpose in your life. Think about what you want your tombstone to say and work towards that.
If someone wants to get in touch with Ken Crutchfield, what is the best way to do that?
Sure. So I would say first, for Wolters Kluwer, go to wolterskluwer.com. That's the business that employs me. And they've got some great products and some great services that are applicable to the lawyer community. And then for me, I think the easiest way would be to go to kencrutchfield.com. That is my personal website, and that has email links and other ways, or just do a quick search for Ken Crutchfield on LinkedIn. That's another great way to get in contact with me. I also do a series of articles on Above the Law. So if you want to hear or read a little bit more of my thought process, I've got a fair number of articles out there.
And Wolters Kluwer, just for people, it's spelled capital WOLTERS, capital KLUWER. And if you Google them, I assure you they'll come up, and you can search for Ken within the Wolters Kluwer website. Ken, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on? Anything at all that you'd like to bring up or mention?
I'll bring up AI for a second, just because I spend a lot of time with, we're entering a world where people are feeling really overwhelmed with all the technologies out there. And I think my point to anybody wrestling with that is take a couple of steps, learn a couple of AI tools, see what they can do to help your practice, but don't get overwhelmed. Everybody else is in the exact same position, wondering what's next. And so there's nobody out in front. There's nobody way behind at this point. Just, think of it as taking one step and putting your foot in front of the other one and walking across the floor. I think that's the way to think about these things. There are some great ways to use Gen AI and products like Claude or ChatGPT to help you with your writing, make things a little bit better. Be aware that those technologies do hallucinate, that they can make things up very convincingly. So check your work, which is part of what a lawyer is supposed to do anyhow. Make sure you read the case before you submit something with a citation to a court, because that would be bad if you didn't. And that's one of those great things that ChatGPT can make up. So those would be my thoughts that, would be great for any attorney to just really think through, because it is going to change the way work gets done. I've got a friend who's a personal injury attorney in Ohio, and I was talking with him. He asked his son to go do something he thought was going to take like 2 days as a task, and he came back in like 10 minutes and had a really, really good first draft. And, those are the sorts of things that are the productivity values that can be there. It means there's a different way of reviewing and understanding how to coach and understand what the technology is providing. But there's going to be tremendous opportunities for efficiency and effectiveness and better advice for clients.
Ken Crutchfield, thank you so much for joining me today on the Love Thy Lawyer podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure to talk with you, Louis. Thank you so much.
That's it for today's episode of Love Thy Lawyer. If you enjoyed listening, please share it with a friend and follow the podcast. If you have comments or suggestions, send me an email. Take a look at our website at lovethylawyer.com, where you can find all of our episodes, transcripts, photographs, and information. Thanks to my guests, and to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, Paul Roberts for social media, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman. Hang on. You know what I want to do is I can fix this in the edit, but I would just as soon take a sip of water and let me just try and shoot that intro one more time.